Good evening, everyone. It's great to see everybody this evening. Welcome to the Churchill Club. My name is Karen Tucker, and I am the club CEO. Tonight we present the free economy, how companies make money from giving things away. We have with us Gina Bianchini, CEO of Ning, Joe Kennedy, CEO of Pandora, Ranjith, Kumaran, founder and CTO of YouSendIt, Joe Sipher, co-founder and chief product/marketing officer at Pinger, and just added today we have Neil Young, CEO and founder of Ngcomo. And of course we have our moderator, Chris Anderson, editor-in-chief of Wired magazine. Thank you all for joining us to speak this evening. This program is generously sponsored by Airfoil Public Relations, and we certainly do appreciate their support. Thank you, Airfoil. And I would also like to extend our gratitude to Microsoft for their generosity in allowing us to use this facility. A quick mention about upcoming programs. On Thursday, July 30, we present New Rules, New Opportunities, China 2010, with a distinguished panel of people who have been doing business in China for a while, and they are going to look toward the new year and share their insights. We hope that you will consider joining us for that. And if you are interested in cycling, how many people here are interested in cycling? A few. And how training might apply to your business pursuits. If you're not interested in cycling, you might save the date of August 20th when we have Lance Armstrong's personal trainer, Chris Carmichael. And this program will be held at the Tech Museum of Innovation. Should be a fun one. So please watch for other program announcements soon. We are working on some very exciting ones for you. For those of you who are less familiar with the Churchill Club, we are the premier business and technology forum here in the Bay Area. We have 6,000 members and 23 years of dynamic in-the-news programming. We are a not-for-profit, member-supported organization, and so if you are not a member and you enjoy this evening's program, we would be pleased to have you consider a membership. You can find us always at churchillclub.org, and also you can find us on YouTube and LinkedIn, Facebook, soon to be Ning, and Twitter. And if you are tweeting this evening, please do use the hashtag #ChurchillClub. And now it is a great privilege to introduce our moderator, Chris Anderson. Chris took the helm of Wired in 2001 after serving, among other things, as the U.S. business editor at The Economist, and he has led Wired to 9 national magazine nominations since, and winning the prestigious top prize for general excellence in several years. He wrote the New York Times bestseller, The Long Tail, and his latest book, Free, The Future of a Radical Price, is just off the presses this month. For your convenience, we did make copies available this evening. And Chris's bio, as well as those of the other speakers, appears in the program that you were handed when you came in tonight. But in the category of what does not appear in Chris's bio, a very small amount of digging uncovered the fact that radical ideas run in his family. It turns out that his great-grandfather helped found the American anarchist movement in the late 1800s. So relevant or not, you decide. Chris, we're very pleased to welcome you back to the Churchill Club stage. Please help me welcome Chris Anderson.
Thanks very much, and thank you all for coming tonight. We have tonight we're going to talk about what I say is I think is the most misunderstood 4-letter word beginning with F in the English language. It is, I'm at the end of my book tour. The book came out a couple weeks ago, and I just finished, the world tour of Free, which basically was a world tour of misunderstanding, fear, loathing, terror. Free is weirdly controversial. I was just in New York this week, and Free is in the media industry considered the asteroid, which is destroying all that we hold true and good, journalism, newspapers, that free is considered a bubble. It's considered the subprime mortgage of the internet. It is considered a generational crisis, as we're creating an entitled generation of Google kids who don't think they have to pay for anything. It is destroying the careers of musicians and artists, and basically, from New York's perspective, it is just a bad thing. And there's a genie that one hears about that came out of a bottle that one hears about. And this was somehow that some people a decade or two ago made a decision to make the internet free. And had we only not made that decision, we would all be better off, and the San Francisco Chronicle would be fine. Meanwhile, here in Silicon Valley, we know there was no genie, there was no bottle, there was no decision. This is based on the underlying economics of digital distribution, that bits are different, that atoms have real costs, atoms are inflationary, bits are deflationary, the marginal costs are close to zero. Whatever it costs to do things digitally today, it's going to cost half as much a year from now. And that by the laws of economics, if price follows marginal cost, that free becomes an inevitability. And the question is not can you stop free, but how can you use free? And that's what we're going to talk about today. We are, I think here in the technology industry, we understand that free kind of comes with digital, which is not to say that everything's going to be free, the principal misunderstanding of my book, which will plague me forever. But rather that you will compete with free or you will use free, or both. And the question and the paradox, the seeming paradox that you can have a marketplace that is dominated by free and yet have billion-dollar companies, as Google has demonstrated. This is not a paradox here in the Valley, but it is very much a paradox outside in the rest of the world, where I am reminded tiresomely and constantly that there's no such thing as a free lunch, which we know, and yet what we're realizing is that what's different about digital is, yes, I mean, the costs must be paid. We all have servers, we all have bandwidth, the costs must be paid, but they don't have to be paid by everybody. That the few can subsidize the many. That a third party, in the case of an advertiser, can subsidize the consumers. That if as long as you're not paying, it really is free. Unlike the physical world, where buy one get one free is not really free, and free gift inside is not really free. In this case, Google is really free, and and all the companies here offer products that are really free, and yet we all intend to make money one way or another. So we're going to talk about business models built around free, and we have a I'm going to sort of roughly give everyone their assignments. We have with Neil and Ngcomo, we have games. Games are, I would argue, the most interesting laboratory for free. It's an industry that is switching from a box that you buy in a store at $50 to an online model that's typically free to play. But how you convert those free customers to paying customers is a work in progress, and it's all about psychology and incentives and time, money, calculus, and all that kind of stuff. So that's fascinating to watch. We have Joe next to Neil, and Joe has an iPhone app, text-free and pick-free, and this is going to be the iPhone app market is the second, I think, most interesting laboratory of free. It's a marketplace where it is trending to zero. 0 and 99 cents are the two most popular prices, and yet there are companies that are making good money off that. We have Ranjith is going to be representing the enterprise with YouSendIt, and the fact that we know free works with consumers. It turns out it works with companies as well. We have Joe from Pandora, who's going to be talking about the music industry, the original industry, to both use free in the form of radio, etc., and then have free imposed upon it, as the MP3 and Napster and piracy rendered the original, the sort of recording free to many consumers, and the industry had to find a business model around that. And the industry no longer defined solely as the labels, but instead new parties, Apple, other non-traditional music companies that are finding ways to profit from free. And Gina, who is very kindly on panels with me, it seems like every week these days, is the one I know best. She runs Ning.
I have a day job.
She does have a day in between panels.
Right.
She runs Ning, And Ning is one of the social networks that both uses free and freemium, the combination of free and premium, using free to market the service and then upselling some to paid. And we'll be talking a lot. I think it will, I'll segue to that in a minute. But you were on a panel this morning with Facebook and MySpace, and and one of the big questions, we get it. Google's the poster child of free. We understand that Google can make money around free, but what about the rest of us? Is this a winner-take-all sort of thing, or is it possible for the social networks to convert their audiences to money as well? And so broadly, you'll see that there's two business models. The two main business models of free online are the advertising model, which was the original business model of the internet: build traffic, monetize attention, sell the attention to advertisers. Kind of a no-brainer. You didn't really have to think about your business model. You just had to think about your product and your consumer. And this was the Yahoo era, et cetera. It worked okay until banners stopped working really, and we realized that there were limits to advertising. Google then invented a new form of advertising. That was the second generation of free, and AdSense was an advertising model that was targeted for the internet. It was measurable. The CPMs, or the effective CPMs, went way up, and that worked great for Google, but not so well for everybody else. And now, in the third wave of free, we're focused on freemium, which is actually getting people to pay us money, as God intended. So with that, I think I'm going to assume that most of the audience here does not need to be convinced that you can make money from free, that free is a kind of a natural price on the internet. And we're going to hopefully turn into the most sophisticated conversation of my entire book tour, I hope. And we'll talk about the details of how do you figure out where to charge, where not to charge, what to charge for, what the conversion rates are. In a world where everything's free, what will people pay for? So let's start in the old form of free, the advertising model, and ask ourselves first the question: are ads still a good model of free? Let me start with you, Gina.
So I think advertising is absolutely still a good model for free. I think what is happening right now from a macro perspective is that there are fundamental shifts really across the board. So certainly as more stuff comes online, and we're 15 years into this, the more, or a little bit longer than that, but as more people spend more of their time and do more things online, it's also natural that they're going to feel a little bit more comfortable spending money and having different types of interactions online. So I think that that's one of the things that you're seeing in moving from the first wave to the second wave to this third wave, where people are spending more and more of their time online. It's certainly I think still a major advertising opportunity, but I think advertising is going to look and be different than it was in television, than it was in print before it. And I don't think that that's a controversial statement or something that is particularly innovative thinking, but I do think we are still figuring out what advertising is going to look like in this online world where people are spending so much of their day online, whether it's mobily, whether it's on the internet directly, whether it's on a desktop app, getting and consuming internet-based information and data. So I think it's just going to look different in the same way that television advertising took a little bit to figure out what was going to work on TV, as it was different than being a radio ad. I mean, again, I'm not necessarily saying anything that is particularly insightful, but it's fascinating. It's still fascinating to me that the majority of the original television shows were people standing there and being taped talking on the radio or talking into a microphone. And the ads and the sponsorship was basically transitioning just what had happened on radio.
There were still, I believe there were still photos.
Yeah. And when you look at that and think about how long it took for sort of television to fully get comfortable with what advertising needed to be, clearly in 2009 and beyond, we need a new ad unit. And we need advertisers to have an authentic partnership. Certainly in the social networking world, brands have got to be authentic and be a part of these grassroots, very organic conversations, at least in the case of Ning, around people's interests and passions.
When you say ad unit, and I should say this is a matter dear to my heart, or rather a matter of constant nightmares, because I'm in the media business. We are seeing declining CPMs. Actually, we're not, but we're we have a great ad sales team, but in general, look at the New York Times, et cetera, banner ads are becoming less effective. CPMs are declining, part because of competition. There's so much inventory in the marketplace. YouTube has not yet found a video ad unit as effective as Google figured out in text. Facebook has not, is moving towards local as its unit, but it has not yet figured out. You're largely running AdSense.
Today we're running AdSense, yeah.
So what is this new unit?
Well, I think we're all trying to figure it out. And I think actually this is one area where the innovation of Silicon Valley and the fundamental everybody has to be different than the person next to them actually is something that is going to get in the way. It may actually create some very interesting ad units or ad experiences for brands on a discrete individual service. But the reason I think that you're seeing this longer delay in online advertising really coming into its own as more and more people are spending more and more of their time online as opposed to television or print is the fact that there's no really easy way to buy advertising online. It is easy to buy broadcast television. You don't need a PhD and to understand how every single service is absolutely different than the other. And so then if you think about it, the two times where online advertising has seen a step up in terms of the amount of dollars coming into it was first in 1995 with the IAB and the standard ad units of a banner ad, and second with Google. And so sort of either I think the online advertising world has got to, again, come into some kind of acknowledgement, understanding standards as it relates to an ad unit that's going to work in an inherently real-time, social, dynamic environment from here to beyond. Or you have to have the scale that a Google has to really be on the front lines and to be on the radar screen of large brand advertisers that need to get the reach as well as the targeting. And so I really think that there is this great opportunity, and really there are only two choices. It's like everybody's got to come together and really agree on standards, and hopefully that will be led by, the leaders of the industry. Or alternatively, it has to be a winner-takes-all kind of situation, which is what you saw happen to Google and what has made Google so successful.
So advertising is your main revenue driver at the moment as well. Do you think that it is effective at the moment and it's sufficient for you, or do you also believe that we have to reinvent a new form?
I have a lot of energy around the new form, but I'd say, we've made a ton of progress, using what we have. We've done some reinvention. Those who use the site in terms of much more a surround form of advertising, much less kind of the standard IAB units.
Just to remind people, this is Pandora, the streaming internet music service.
But I think, while the unit's very important, I have tremendous passion around it. I think, as Gina talked about at the end, I think a key thing, though, is scale. Because when you ask, does this old model of advertising still work? Does it have legs? I think the answer is, for 95, maybe 99% of the companies that get started out here, no. Unless you can live on the AdSense stuff, right? But the advertising business has been, will always be a scale game. And if you don't have a site that has the potential to have 10 million, 20 million, 30 million users, the kind of reach that makes you interesting to advertisers, it's going to be an exercise in frustration. Right? And I think, I think the pendulum, it's interesting, the pendulum has swung from, so many sites getting funded 2-3 years ago, like, hey, our model's going to be advertising, we're going to make it an advertising, most of which never had a prayer of doing that because just the scale required to do it is too steep. Now I think that the pendulum swung almost to like, there's no hope for ad-supported. And I think there is some hope, but there's a tremendous requirement in terms of whether you're able to deliver enough audience to be meaningful.
So the general, after September of last year and the economic crisis and the clear limits of advertising, the general tendency among those companies who use free, and that's almost everybody in the digital space one way or another, is to switch to freemium, is to find a way to get paid directly. And let's start with games, because that's probably had the games switched online. What, in China and Korea about 6 or 7 years ago?
6 or 7 years ago.
Right, and that was free to play, and that's now migrated to Europe and the United States, especially as a generation is used to playing things online. Tell me how you think about free and how you think about paid from a games perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the games industry in general is in a pretty radical transition. It's the sort of packaged goods retail model in the West is declining pretty rapidly. There's a flight just towards the higher quality brands. Innovation is a little bit more. It's more challenging for people to make both the investments to be competitive in those spaces, and also to be able to get their software in front of as many people. Digital distribution has changed, is changing that pretty radically. What Chris was referring to in Asia was really born of piracy and also cultural elements. So if you took Korea, which is really the birthplace of sort of free online gaming, Korea had a fairly robust packaged goods video game business until the proliferation of broadband. And what happened with the proliferation of broadband was that the physical packaged goods were able to be pirated and distributed, really quickly and really easily, along with the culture of the country, which a little more controlled than China, but the ability to buy even CD-ROM software pretty inexpensively. And then the cultural angle is, if you live in Korea, it turns out, and you're a kid, it turns out you live with a couple of generations of people in in an apartment that's about 1,500, 1,400 square feet, maybe smaller. And so to get out of the house, you would go to these parlors, these gaming parlors called PC bangs. And the combination of those two events basically led to the concept of paying for time. You would go to a gaming center, PC bang, and you would literally say, I'm going to play for a period of time, and you would buy time cards, and you would plug them into a reader, and you would sit down and you would play. And so over time, as there became more and more resistance for paying that way, the PC bang started to become free, that anybody could go in, and the software started to become monetized from item purchases. And item purchasing is really at the very core of free gaming. And the basic concept is this: anybody can start playing the game. You get given a currency. The currency depletes. It turns out it depletes faster than your compulsion to consume it. And some segment of the audience can't fight their compulsion, so they go buy, either directly themselves, or certainly more in North America, have somebody else pay because they filled out an offer on Super Awards or what have you, to give you more of that regulating stat, that currency that allows you to play more. And so the key idea in video games and the sort of transition from paid to free is moving monetization from the front of the experience to the core compulsion loop of the game. Games are fundamentally these compulsive experiences that you do over and over and over. And instead of asking for people to pay $50 up front, what you're really asking people to do is to pay over the life of the game. And of course, to the point that you were making, not 100% of the audience pays. And so, 90% of the audience don't pay, and they're playing much less frequently. The 10% that do pay a lot, and subsidize not just the other 90%, but then some, and have formed the basis of some meaningful social game companies. So that's one of the mechanisms, and really the predominant mechanism for free monetization in the gaming space.
Just to follow up on that, you came from EA,
yeah.
It's the classic packaged goods business.
Yes.
It's a Hollywood business. It's hit driven. It's opening weekend. It's you get them once and never again, unless you're Madden, and then you get them once a year. And now you're in the internet delivered a game space. You now have a relationship with these people. You're with your players. They're with you for months, if not years. You can charge them on a monthly basis or upsell them on an item basis. What's different about relationship-based gaming industry and a kind of a point-of-sale gaming industry?
Well, I mean, you do still have a relationship with the customer when you're selling a packaged goods. It's just the relationship tends to be filtered through the brand of the company or the brand of the property. And it's true that great franchises in the video game space have failed because you've failed to honor that relationship with the customer in your prior release, and so the sequel falls. It's really the filter is gone. Right, so now the relationship that you have with the customer is direct, it's immediate, and there's an opportunity for a percentage of that audience to actually participate in the process of the game being built, whether that's through leaving data in their wake. Before I left Electronic Arts, one of the studios I ran was Maxis, and we did a game there called Spore, which is Will Wright's most recent game. Will Wright is the guy who created The Sims and SimCity. And one of the amazing things about Spore is, as you play, you leave content in your wake that is propagated through the entire network. So as you visit new planets, you're seeing planets with creatures or structures or or places that have been created by other players as they're moving through the game. And so that's an algorithmic and a programmatic way for your audience to participate in the creation of the game. So you've got sort of that end of the spectrum, and then you've got a vocal and committed audience of people that are really helping you try to make your game the very best it can be. And you can employ them in different ways. You can employ them.
And they'll pay you for the privilege.
They'll not only will they pay you for the privilege, but they will do work on your behalf. They will recruit players in return for that regulating, stat, and some percentage of those players will turn into paying customers. And so,
has there ever been an industry in history where people will pay you to help build your products?
No, but didn't Tom Sawyer figure that one?
That's true.
So I mean, that's the game space is particularly interesting, and we founded our business to think about not just internet delivery, but also the iPhone and the iPod Touch and the App Store. And so we're really at the kind of the epicenter of the sort of the race to zero in pricing, and sort of figuring out how do you monetize those relationships, not just on the iPhone platform, but sort of across the landscape.
Let's continue with the iPhone as an app platform. The iPhone as a marketplace, as a delivery mechanism, and as an experiment in economics. It started at sort of $0 and $9.99, and then prices have the average prices have come down. You see a proliferation of free apps, some of them advertising supported, but not many. You see a lot of 99-cent apps, hard to get attention, etc. And then you see the hybrids, the ones that have free and paid at higher than 99 cents. Start with text-free and explain how that, not only what it is today, but where you started, what you thought it was going to be when you created the app, and where you ended up.
Yeah, well, we started, text-free is an app that allows you to send text for free from an iPod Touch or an iPhone. And actually, we thought that we were going to be completely advertising-based. We were one of those guys that said, okay, that's how we're going to do it. It has to be free. It's the iPhone. And we sort of convinced ourselves with some models that we could make it free. And then actually we ran into Neil at this Kleiner Perkins thing, and he convinced us that we should be charging for this app because he was making money. And so we started thinking about it, and we had to try to balance these two different things. One was, hey, people pay $20 a month to AT&T for unlimited text messaging. On the other hand, we have kids that won't pay anything, or they'll pay 99 cents, and there's the part of the culture in the store. We did a survey, at least for our customers, 55% of them buy from iTunes gift cards. They're 12 to 17 or 24-year-olds. And so it's not like, some of them, it's going off on dad's credit card. Great. A lot of them, they have a $10 gift card. 99 cents is 1/10 of that. $5.99, which is what we charge, is 6/10 of that. So we really struggled with how do we price this thing within the context of the culture of the store and within the greater culture of, hey, there's some value here.
And so you initially launched as free, and then at a certain point you run out of free texts.
Yes. So there's two products. We do have a free version of Text-Free Lite, and this is very common in the store. And we have the paid version, Text-Free Unlimited, and essentially finding that balance between what is free and what's going to get that person to upgrade was difficult. And we decided to make it that will give you 15 messages per day, every day. So every day you can, and we wanted to make it big enough so that lots of people could just live on Text-Free Lite. That was great, because we are actually advertising in there, and it's supportive revenue. It's not significant revenue for us. And then when they hit that 15th message, they get, okay, well, you can wait till midnight, or you can upgrade to Text-Free Unlimited and have unlimited texting for a whole year. And we've had just incredible success with that. We went in the store in March, and we've been in the top 100 ever since with a $6 application, because we in some ways we lucked on this right balance and the right pricing. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe we could have optimized it more. There's a lot of people that say, well, you should charge $9.99. There's very few products in the store that actually are successful at that. The only ones are ones that are branded. So The Sims or Monopoly or Scrabble, they can do well in the store. If you don't have an existing brand, it's very, very difficult. You have to use this kind of free paid model and cross-sell across your applications.
And roughly, what's the balance of free to paid users?
We convert about 18% of our free users end up going and buying Text-Free Unlimited, which is a big, big number.
Exactly. The general rule of thumb is that you want to be somewhere between, 5 seems to be the minimum. You don't want to have less than 5% conversion rate, because remember the paids are subsidizing the frees. So, for your fixed costs and your marginal costs, et cetera, it seems like below 5%, especially in the gaming space, you're probably losing money. And then if you over 10, you're probably profitable, and at 18, you're probably, depending on your costs, you're probably very profitable. And if you get to 25, you're a Club Penguin, and you're Disney quality profitable, which is great. There may be some Club Penguin parents out here. You'll know the experience of having one of your kids come and ask you for the credit card because they want a pet for their penguin, or to be on the glacier with the cool kids. Very effective. Ranjith, let's talk about what's different about the enterprise space, and maybe why don't you start about your own sort of journey of pricing.
So I've been listening to kind of all the experiences of all the other companies, and YouSendIt. I've been doing YouSendIt for a little over 5 years now, and we've done it all. We launched as a free service. There was no ads, no monetization model. It was just, let's get users to use this thing and see what happens. We had some hypotheses about what type of users we would ultimately convert. And a few months into it, servers started falling over, and we were always at the data center. And that's a good thing. I think I just lost my mic, but that's a good thing when servers fall over. And that's kind of when we realized that, hey, there's page views in this thing. We actually have 1 million users coming and generating page views. So maybe instead of going deeper into my credit card debt, we will show some paid ads to subsidize the server cost. And that got addictive. So we started optimizing the site for ads. But as soon as we started doing that, people started complaining. They said, well, we're using this thing at work, and really we'll pay you for such and such a feature set. And that was kind of the genesis of the model that we have today. Ultimately, we shut off all the ads, and we switched completely to a subscription model. I think last year was the first full year that we didn't show any ads on the site, because we did the math. When you price the impressions, we would do better converting our users to a paid service than any of the ad networks or Google or anyone could ever pay us for the traffic we had. Now, we have an international business. Everyone sends files. So one leg in the US, one leg in China, for example, is not, well, these days we've been firewalled, much like most of the internet, but one leg in Vietnam. And it's really hard for a company our size to monetize eyeballs in Vietnam. Even though these days we have 6 million unique visitors to the site, it's really, really hard for a company for our size to monetize anywhere outside of the United States. So we had a business based on ads that was profitable in the United States and nowhere else. And that was kind of the thesis for going big with this business and raising money, was to say, let's test a paid model. Let's see if we can get people to pay for at least a thin subscription service. And the story I usually tell is we launched the service the night of February 28th, 2006, and no one had ever paid us anything. And I was sitting in the cube of our lead developer at the time. He's director of engineering now, and he pushed the button. And 4 months later, he was panicking. He said, "There's some sort of problem with the database because it's telling me that we already have a paid user." So that was 4 minutes after we pushed the button. And that's kind of when I knew that, yeah, this thing has legs, and we started to switch over to 100% to ad revenue. And back then, when we were running it as an ad business, it was a big enough business to support 3 founders, a bunch of servers. It was a lifestyle business. But now we have everywhere from, we just cracked 100,000 paid subscribers, and that includes anyone from small office, home office, all the way up to 3,000 seat installations in Fortune 500. So my thesis was always, my hypothesis was always, every consumer is also a professional. And that's kind of what YouSendIt has proven out, is if you concentrate on consumer experience, even if it's not a consumer product, you can get this grassroots movement inside enterprise. And that's how we used free to get enterprise. Now, we've been in enterprise less than 2 years deliberately. I mean, I remember when I was running it out of my apartment, I had CIOs calling me and saying, "You either need to build us something or we're going to kill it." And there were just a few of us then, but now we have it delivered. We have a product team. We have our data centers gold-plated so that enterprises can use it as well. And those guys, they may not pay us the most per seat, but they churn incredibly little. So we have very little churn in our very large installations because they buy for 3-4 years, whereas a consumer may pop in and out every couple months.
One of the questions I get a lot is generational. Is this instinct to that things on the internet, quote unquote, should be free, or that everything on the internet is free? This sort of Google generation presumption, is this here to stay? Are we looking at have we trained a generation to expect everything to be free, at least to sample? Not that they never pay, but they expect everything to have some utility at free.
Yeah, I would put it a slightly different way, which is what is phenomenal about just the world we live in, whether it is from the kinds of efficiencies that a retailer like Walmart has put out there in terms of just the way people spend their money is different when things are low cost or when you're able to get a lot of value from free. And so you have more discretionary income to do different things with it. So yes, I think it's generational. I think it's also enabled by technology in the same way that you saw generational shifts in the Industrial Revolution as well. So I think that's a good thing. I mean, I think the fact that today you can go online and you can use so many free services that exist, that the very fundamental level of value has been huge, just even in the time that we've been in market, and every service is trying to provide value for free. I think that is just a good societal thing.
And a lasting one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because once you go in this direction, first of all, I think people are building smarter businesses, because in order to create something that you're offering for free and that you're building into how you think about the business model, your cost structure has also got to be low.
Right.
And so, I think it all sort of works out well, but I think the net result is that people are able to have a higher quality of life with more connections, with more things that they can use, more things that they're finding value from. And the very definition of value is changing, and I think changing for the better.
Music's actually quite a good example of this. We saw the shift go from you pay for music to music is free to iTunes, where you're not paying for music, you're paying for convenience, and recommendations and risk reduction and metadata and all this kind of stuff. You're paying for a service rather than a product. And so what we did is we sort of broke the association between paying for music and then reestablished it, but on entirely different terms. You're in this business. What can you say going forward about the relationship between money and music? You don't actually sell music.
We sell $1 million worth of music a month.
Okay.
We have some connection there. But I actually think the most interesting thing in music may not be us per se, but is what artists are doing today. Because the model for artists used to be, try and get yourself in a position where you can be signed by a major label, and the major label and maybe you would make a lot of money selling copies of your recorded music. And obviously that's completely failed. And I find like the most interesting examples in the artist world, and this is becoming more and more common, this is becoming kind of the word of mouth among artists, is if you're familiar with the case like Trent Reznor, 9 Inch Nails. Like, you know what? It doesn't have to be a one-size-fit-all recording that I offer to consumers. The truth is, I as an artist offer lots of different things to consumers. I can offer them a single song. I can offer them this, an entire album. I can offer them kind of the special album with the extra tracks. I can offer them kind of the coffee book quality version of the album that my super fans might be able, they might want to pay $100 for. And I tour, but I don't just tour. I can invite my super fans backstage. And I was with Peter Gocher, who's the founder of a company called Topspin, which is creating tremendous traction serving do-it-yourself artists these days, and some very major artists. And he said, there are numerous people making, numerous artists making hundreds of thousands of dollars working this model of recognizing the full range of the products that they offer to consumers. And it ranges from using a free download of a song that people will love as a customer acquisition tool to get an email address, because that's a value exchange that's very valuable for a band, particularly while it's still building itself. But then offering this entire range of products, some of which he told me there's one thing where like you can go hang out with this artist for a weekend and he'll take you to some shows and introduce you to some of his other famous friends, and that's $75,000 is the price being asked for that. And so I think just they completely kind of rethought, or there is in the process, a complete rethinking of where's the value. Broadly speaking, it fits this kind of theme of the few are paying more, but they get tremendous value and feel a tremendous sense of value from it. And the many are able perhaps to go by for nothing,
right,
or very close to nothing, 99 cents. But there are artists for whom this is working at the level of a middle-class lifestyle or above, and is widely thought of in music circles as kind of where this is going.
There's so many paradoxes of free, but one of them is that free allows you to charge more. Because what you're doing is you're introducing the product to more people, and therefore being able to select the super fans. In traditional businesses, the idea of product segmentation and audience segmentation is completely conventional. You slice your customer base into the low engagement all the way up to the high engagement. You find your $1, $10, $100, $1,000 business. You go down the long tail, if you will. But we didn't have, because our distribution channels were so one size fits all. It's like it's a box in the store. We got space for one box. We don't have space for 100 boxes. Digital distribution completely opened up the opportunity to do classic product segmentation. And because it's digital, the price is arbitrary. It's completely arbitrary. It's all determined by psychology. I'm sure games are the best example. So my old relationship with games was it's $50 or nothing, right? I mean that was it. Now I can have zero. I can have the low price game. Are you seeing people now paying more than ever before because of the flexibility of?
There are certain people that that pay more. That in the case of the social of social MMOs and social games, people will pay a lot of money for that regulating stat, and at the end of the day, their consumption of the regulating stat is really determined by how deep into the game they are and how much time they have on their hands, and there are people that will spend a lot, in hundreds of dollars a month, to continue participating in an experience. So, yeah, absolutely.
So younger people have more time than money.
Yeah.
And they'll grind their way through achievement, and older people have more money than time, and they'll buy their way into achievement.
Yeah, exactly. And the key with video games is to make it's really not it's really about compensating for lack of time. It's actually not compensating for skill. So games fall apart if you allow people to buy things that upset the balance of the game.
So buy like this awesome sword that allows you to kill everybody. That would be bad.
Yeah, that would suck.
Yeah.
That
Technical term.
It's a technical term. That's exactly right. I mean, it's interesting listening, to you talking about the 15 texts. It turns out that's your regulating stat. It's sort of there are I think regulating stats to be found across the landscape of free, and they just have to be applied. And I think games really interesting place to kind of look to. I'll give you just a little example in terms of just optimizing ads, right? So once you have that regulating stat, that currency of value, you can associate it with just simple ads in your software to enhance the likelihood that somebody will actually click on that, and dramatically change the click-through rates on those things. So it could be that in this sort of game theory world, the new ad unit is sort of like the incentive ad unit, and finding those kind of currencies and deploying them effectively so you can improve your click-through rates and your conversion rates, associating those points with actually following through on the product, taking the things that companies like Super Rewards are sort of doing, Super Rewards systems are doing, and tying those closely to these currencies, I think can actually start to change human behavior, what they're likely to choose to install, versus choose not to install. If I've got a choice of 2 games on the App Store, and for one I get 1,000, units of the regulating stat, and for the other I get none, which one am I gonna, am I gonna choose? And in many cases, what you're actually purchasing might be of worse quality. It's just the regulating stat has compensated for that.
It's interesting because we were looking for a regulating stat for our second product, this Pick Free, that allows you to send picture messages or MMS for free, and it just didn't feel right to let people 5 a day would be. Well, probably everyone would use the free version and we'd never get any money, and 1 seems so, like not good enough. And so we ended up throwing up our hands and not doing a free version. And we ended up using the user base and cross-selling the user base of Text Free over to Pick Free. So, and it's been a very successful product for us, but we couldn't find, maybe there isn't a regulating stat for every single model.
Yeah, since I'm always so focused on consumer experience, something I've just made up along the way is I don't want to bother 90% of people. Like I look at usage and I'll go, I don't want to bother 90% of people with my nagging. So where's that cutoff line? And that's just something that we've used along the way. What you said earlier. It would be nice if we could convert 10% of our user base to paid. So that's something I've used. The other things are often competitive. What have your competitors set as the floor or the ceiling or whatever, what have you? Those seem to be the 2 things that kind of put things into equilibrium for us.
I know we've got a bunch of people who are probably living this world in some way in the audience. I think I want to open up at this point to audience questions. Karen, how are we going to handle the microphones? There we go.
We've got 2 microphones.
Okay, so microphones are moving. Raise your hand and ask anybody. And there's one over there, and there'll be another one up. There's another one up here as well.
Yes, good evening. So I understand the point that everybody needs to be a little different from the person next to them, but then I don't see how the scalability is possible, or is it that everybody's not as different as we think we are?
I'm not sure I quite understood the question. Could you elaborate a little bit? What do you mean?
Well, what I'm trying to say is if everybody's so different, each consumer needs a different experience or even a different advertising experience, or consumers might need different business models. But then how does one organization achieve scalability if every customer is unique?
Yeah, so I think fundamentally we're not necessarily saying that every single person in the world is unique in the sense of, I think more of what we're saying is that when you have some kind of leveling or some kind of escalation of whether it's things you can do, levels you can accomplish, that people want to compare themselves to each other. So I think that's a little bit of the message there. That being said, I actually think that one of the things that we do at Ning is really look at how do we build and offer the sort of most concentrated number of features or experiences. In our case, people creating their own social networks for specific interests and passions, and do it in such a way that has maximum flexibility. So the thing that's actually really interesting is that we have 1.3 million social networks that have been created on Ning, 4,000 new social networks created every single day. And what our goal was to enable software, which you can do pretty distinctly and uniquely online, and as Chris said, bits, so that people could have incredibly different experiences. So what is really interesting is we're seeing social networks on Ning for people who are fans of the Twilight Saga, to analytics professionals who have their own private social network to meet and talk to other analytics professionals. And those experiences are very different. And yet what's interesting is the core truths of how people want to interact are actually quite consistent across different interests and passions, which actually allows you to have, as a technology company, a broad-based platform that enables inherent creativity and people to do very different things with it.
Let me elaborate a little bit on I'm one of those passionate Ning users, and the way it works is it's an a la carte feature list that you can pay. What is it, $19.95 to take ads off?
Yeah, so it's free, and then if you
it's
want,
free. It's free, and probably most of them are free. So 90+% are free.
$24.95. You got grandfathered into the old price.
Okay, so so I'm going to now pay $24.95 to take the ads off. Now, why would I do that? Well, because I want a more professional appearance, and I can put my own ads on, and I actually do that, and I make $500 a month in the ads.
We're definitely raising the prices now.
Yeah, so it's a huge win-win. I can control the look of my social network, so it looks more professional. It's a better experience for my users, and I make more money by getting a little involved. And then I can do other things. I can take down Ning branding. I can add more features. I can get more space, etc. And the general idea is that as I get more involved in my social network, and as I want to have more control over the look and feel, Ning will charge me for that liberty. And by the time I'm there, I'm so happy to pay because at this point, the network is such an important thing to me, and my community is so important to me that the price of controlling it is trivial compared to the value I get for it. Yes, sir, you had a question here.
Yeah, my question is about virtual versus physical. The presumed value of anything physical is greater, even if it were the same thing. I'm wondering if that's having an impact on monetizing worldwide, where online shopping is still not fully there. It's ramping up, and it seems to me it could help monetize any of these impressions that that you guys provide. In the U.S., obviously that's a mature. It might pay for your $500 that you see on your network. So I'm wondering how you see real physical stuff affecting free.
I mean, there's a general presumption that in the physical world, in the world of atoms, there's this connection between price and value, right? And these experiments I talk about in the book, where you prefer to pay more because you sense the quality is true, and that relationship between price and value is broken online. I mean, not broken. It's just it doesn't exist. We don't think less of Google because it's free. We evaluate the merits and the quality of a product based on other things: our utility, our experience, what our friends say, reputation, that sort of stuff. Your question, I guess, is when you're selling physical stuff online.
Is physical subsidizing the virtual in the U.S. and is that why there's a divide? I think one of you said in monetizing outside the U.S. it just seems very hard.
Well, the reason it's hard to monetize outside the U.S. is because the advertisers don't want to reach those customers. I mean, that's my perception. I would not say that physical goods are subsidizing digital goods.
I think there are some examples, things like Webkins, which I think is interesting,
Yeah.
and what's, which is for those of you who don't have kids, it's a toy, soft toy that you buy, comes with a code. You go to the website, and now that character has presence on the website in a very simple social space, and then your kids are motivated to kind of collect all of the toys. And I think what is interesting is how that is now starting to kind of permeate television, and how television channels like the Cartoon Network will run a show. They'll have a toy line and an MMO, and they're sort of trying to connect the dots between between each of those things. So I think that there are some examples of how physical can help
more obvious
monetize.
example is cell phones. Yeah. Free cell phones are physical goods, and they're paid for by virtual goods of the service that really cost the carrier nothing.
Or for that matter, the iPod subsidizes iTunes.
Yeah.
And even pure virtual goods, we've seen eBay auctions for virtual goods go for tens of thousands of dollars, whereas the physical manifestation of it, people are like, oh, that's the imitation. I don't want that. I want the original virtual good. There's great stories like that coming out of the gaming space as well.
I think that's the sort of more mind-blowing thing that's happening, and certainly it's actually happening more outside the U.S. in terms of virtual goods and virtual currencies being in some places, a competitor to the actual currency.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the thing that's sort of almost harder to get your head around, but it's also really important for web businesses that, something like Ning or even you're seeing with other social networking services, our business is 50% global. It's 50% of our traffic is outside the U.S. When you just look at the fact that the vast majority of advertising spending worldwide happens in the U.S., you want to make sure that you have a diversified revenue stream where it's not only advertising but virtual gifts, because you have a global business, you need to have a global revenue model. And I think that's happening more and more, but it's certainly an initial conversation, and I think most people, certainly with what's happening in social games today and the iPhone ecosystem, the thing I always hear is people are spending money on giving each other, a birthday present for $1 online, and because it's not a physical good. And I think that's something that is absolutely happening and will only continue to be the case going forward.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to hear the panel's opinion on crowdfunding, a model which has worked for public radio, and how will it work for web businesses? Will it make a significant contribution for any web business?
The tip jar.
We will take any that this crowd of people would like to give to us. We will take it.
We see on some of our social networks that they run it as a service, and it's a tip jar. We also see people run their own ads. We also see people just do it for the pure enjoyment of it. So I think there's all sorts of ranges, and at least in our case, it really just depends on the purpose of the social network and what people are trying to do with it.
Enterprises don't tip.
Yes, my name is Pelionis from Hojan Tech. This is a question for the panel. As the genome-based economy is here, there is a singularity for recommendation. Most of it is, most of the free stuff is based on recommendation. In the past, recommendation was based on past experience. If you bought this book, Amazon recommends that other book that usually people buy. With the genome available, the population is split, probably right in the middle. Some people want to protect their privacy. Some others already donate their genome for data banks. So do you see, as a panel, a huge opportunity giving away free stuff based on that you have never tried before, but your genome is compelling you to try?
Oh, my. Yeah, I suspect we're not qualified to answer that question properly.
Can your genome determine if you have an addictive personality? Absolutely. Then we will give them video games.
But I mean, seriously, 23andMe has lowered their gene sequencing, the gene, I guess it's not sequencing exactly, but they're testing to $99 if you're willing to provide your data to the researchers for free. And I imagine that as that business ramps up, as the research side of the component ramps up, you can get a free gene test if you're willing to donate your DNA to scientific research.
It's already there.
Already there. Over there.
Yes, I think in other mediums we've seen a growth of product placement, for instance, if all the Transformers are Chevy cars. But I feel like there's challenges in the internet space to do this same thing. For instance, if Google, instead of highlighting that they have paid search results, if they just mix that in with their normal results, I think we'd see a large backlash. But I'd like to hear you talk about maybe some of the challenges or what's happening to bring product placement to the web.
I mean, I'll speak a little bit to this, but I think probably games are another great example. Product placement works in domains where you have distribution scarcity. So, if you've only got X number of television channels, you can get away with product placement because people don't have a whole lot of choice. In movies, likewise, theatrical distribution, you're going to probably see they'd have to really crap up a movie with product placement to ruin the entire movie and overcome the power of their distribution channel. The problem with the web, of course, is that you don't have any distribution scarcity, and so audiences are gained through trust and reputation and word of mouth, et cetera. And the risks of ruining that trust relationship with product placement is much higher in the online space. An interesting question, probably for you, Neil, is that games are somewhere between the internet and Hollywood.
Yeah.
How scary is it? How dangerous is it to put product placement in games?
I think it depends on the game. I mean, I think it can really increase relevance. Two examples. We did a game at game series at Electronic Arts called Medal of Honor, and we did a deal with Jeep, and basically put a Jeep in in Medal of Honor. It enabled it to be a much more authentic experience for people, and we were able to kind of promote outside of the game experience that association. In the Sims business, we did a product placement with H&M, and the Sims audience is sort of 60% female teens, predominantly. And we did a product placement where we put a number of garments in the Sims 2 from H&M. You could upload some of your own designs and basically design outfits.
It's worse than this. You sold the H&M expansion disc, and I know because my daughter asked for it and I bought it for her. Yeah. So I paid you and they paid you.
And then hopefully maybe she went into H&M to buy the winning set of stuff. So. I think it can work in certain circumstances.
Yeah, and as a result of the infinite choice online and really the distribution abundance, product placement, at least on our services, is better known as spam.
Yeah. Here first. I guess we go where the microphone goes.
Okay. Hi, Chris. When the long tail first came out, I saw you speak at one of the first keynote presentations. And you made the observation at the time that speaking for keynotes was much more profitable than writing books. And you made the statement saying, if I had to do it all over again, I'd give the book away for free and I would just charge money for keynotes. And I noted with great irony walking in here, a big stash of books with a free sticker on them, but then when you ask them for the book, they say, oh, give me your credit card. It's not free. So I'm wondering between then and now, what changed your mind to not have charge for the book and not make it free?
The book is free. The book's free. The book is free in every form. It's free in the Kindle. It's free. It's free on Scribd. It's free on Google Books. The audio book is free in iTunes podcast. Even the physical. You can even get a free paperback form. I'm not sure how it works exactly. I think you have to register for something like that. So it is free in every way, shape, and form. But we do sell the premium. It's a classic freemium model. We sell the inferior. We give away the inferior forms. Now it's not inferior for everybody, but if you are like me and you value the physical book, you put on your bookshelf with a pretty cover, you can give as a gift. If 10% of the audience still values the physical book, then we'll charge whatever for that, and we'll give all the other forms out for free as a form of marketing. But you know, as you know, business authors in general do make most of the money from speaking, and you know, McKinsey gives away the McKinsey Quarterly because they're making the money from consulting, and so the idea of you giving away the abundance, give away the sort of the one-size-fits-all version of the intellectual property to get maximum reach and exposure, et cetera, and then sell the customized version at a high price. This is Radiohead, right? You give away the music, you sell the tour. It's the same model. So actually, you know, the freaky thing is not that I actually did what I promised on that, is that I got Disney, my publisher, to go along with it.
And what change have you seen from charging to having free on the business overall?
So the experiment is not over. We're just 2 weeks into it. The expectation was going to be that we were going to. So the usual arc of a book is a classic Hollywood one. So you get the big spike, the big sort of opening week, and then it trends down. And what we assumed is that the free was going to cannibalize. The free's all limited, so the Kindle's now expired. So that's well, yours isn't expired, but you can't get it for free. So that was a 1-week deal. The Scribd and Google Books are a 1-month deal. The audiobook is forever. So the notion would be that the early adopters, the first wave, would get the free version, and this would cannibalize sales. But they would read the book. So the main problem with books is that they're not read, and especially with a book called Free. You know, the first wave of discussion about free was, I can imagine what a really stupid book called Free would say, and that would say that everything should be free. And I totally disagree with that. The next wave was, you know. So you know what would be really stupid? That everything should be free. Now, in fairness, Chris Anderson doesn't say that, but you know that would be a really stupid idea. And then the third wave is actually people read the book and they realize it's more about things like freemium, et cetera. And the notion would be that they would then have a more nuanced sense of what the thesis is, and that when these early adopters then come to talk about it and figure out, you know, how it fits into their life, the second wave of adopters would then have to buy the physical book because some of the free ones had expired. And so you would get this sort of initial bump, and then you'd get this sort of second bump. So I can tell you that the book enters the New York Times bestseller list this weekend. So, you know, it didn't kill us in the first week. It looks like it's a little softer in the second week than the long tail was, and we're yet to see whether that second bump of the kind of after the free versions have expired, whether that word of mouth, with the fact that we've got 250,000 downloads of the free book, whether that is in fact going to turn into positive word of mouth and recommendations and people then buying it. And frankly, it depends on the quality of the book. If you got the free book and you didn't like the first page, it doesn't work. I mean, that's the thing about free samples. The samples have to be good, or the whole model doesn't work.
I'm not being paid to be a panelist, by the way. So I hope you're not either.
Oh, really?
But now that you mention it, tip jar.
Hi. My question is related to music. A long time ago, and by a long time ago I mean the early 1990s, if you liked a piece of music, your probably only option for purchasing it was to spend about $16-17 on a plastic disc. Obviously, we know that you fast forward to today, and if you like a song, your option is to pay about 99 cents for that individual song. But what I find interesting is in between then and now was this thing in the late 90s called Napster and Kazaa. And what I wonder, and I posed this question out there, was would the music industry have moved to a 99-cent model were it not for the threat of the 0-cent model? Or if that had never existed, would they have just kind of held on to their plastic disc industry?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's very classic kind of music industry had a business model that worked. They had, you know, recording studios and producers and recording engineers, and they had factories that printed discs, and everything was fine. And if there weren't an external stimulus to change that, it simply wouldn't have changed. You know, I think a lot of case studies will be written on the music business, and even their response now, although each year it is more responsive and more creative, you know, it's certainly been, you know, been a slow process. I think the breakthrough insight really is around this concept of, in a digital world, price segmentation is substantially opened up. I think by and large, the major labels still are not actually taking advantage of this opportunity, but the kind of the leading edge, more creative fringe of the of recording artists are, and I think that will eventually be picked up by the major labels. But yeah, I'd say anyone who's dealt with the music industry would say, it was more than happy with the world in its previous form and would not have changed unless it absolutely had to.
So I have a question. You said before, like, you get like the book for free, you might not read it. Is that a threat, like having all this abundance of applications and tools and stuff for free, and then just you don't use it because you're not, who cares? I didn't pay for it.
But if that was the case, then you wouldn't have the kind of explosive popularity that different services have, because people love them and they're high quality. Yeah. I actually think the better way of thinking about it is when you have a world where many things of value are free, and that's the expectation, that the market actually works on some level more efficiently, because you'll see the things that have the most value pop to the top, and then there is this opportunity for escalating experience, engagement, and payment.
The way I see it is the free product, we have much lower retention on our free product than our paid product. But it's the free product that found the paid guy. And so there's going to be a lot of people that just go, I don't want to use this thing. But the guy who was going to pay, or the gal that was going to pay, they might not have wouldn't have found them if I didn't offer a free product.
Yeah, I think that the distinction between the original paid model, and take music for example, is that you had to be pretty into a band to shell out the $15, and so there was this, you'd already been sold before you paid. With the free one, you can download infinite amounts of music, and maybe you don't listen to most of it on average. But if there's some band you love, then at that point you turn back into a paid customer. So what free does is allows you to reach the broadest possible audience, including the people who have very little interest, all the way up to the people who have intense interest. And by spreading the product far and wide, you're able to discover those customers who you would not have normally been able to reach through traditional pay to get in models.
The risk that I see is just that there is so much that you can only, there is so many free songs, you can only listen to part of them. So you might be missing some, or you.
Yeah, but that's true. But there's no evidence that people, the bands that people love, they love them just as much, possibly even more. So in other words, you can't think about the average. You can't think about, the average song gets listened to less. It's not about the averages, and those songs have no cost to us. I don't care if 1 million people download my book, and only 100,000 read it. That's still great. I mean, how else would I have reached 100,000 people? So I don't worry about the people for whom it wasn't for. I think about all the new people who I wouldn't have otherwise been able to reach, for whom it is for.
Thanks.
Where's the microphone? Oh, yes.
I saw several models discuss: the freemium model, the ad model, the white labeling, enterprise offerings, product placements. And Ranjith, you mentioned that you tried the ad model and decided not to do it and went to the enterprise offerings. I want to know from the other panelists, did you try any other monetization model before you decided on the current monetization model? And if you did, what worked, what did not work, and why you chose the current monetization model?
Well, there's an interesting story in Pandora. Most people don't know this, but actually, for about the first 2 months after we launched, about 3.5 years ago, we were subscription only. We had a brief trial period, and then required subscription, because we actually, ironically, didn't have the confidence in the ad model at that particular moment. And the bottom line is that, at that point we had a conversion rate of about 0.5%, and it just didn't work, and we got some kind of good advice. And I think the insight for me, and this ranges from my previous experience at eLoan, which is a totally different category, internet lending, to other things I've seen, is on the internet, maybe different from the old world, the site or the service has to give first, and has to give enough that the consumer can fully comprehend or substantially comprehend the value. And still, most of those people will want to stay free. But only then do you have a chance to convert people to some form of paid model. And so the idea of having, going from scratch, you've got to pay like out the door, or maybe after a very short trial period, I don't think that fits the ethos of the web. It may be a generational thing, as Chris asked before, but I think that's kind of a permanent fact. The site or the service has to demonstrate substantial value first, and that's why I think the freemium model is I think a very good framework for thinking about it, because it emphasizes the role of free in demonstrating the value for lots of customers, and then price segmentation, value segmentation can kick in.
And I think what's interesting about that is, on some level, it's the exact opposite of the hardware model, where you start high and then you come down in price as cost comes down. In a digital world where really pricing is arbitrary, you need to sort of have this curve that actually goes up, where it has a free segment and then sort of incremental value. And actually, somebody said this to me, and I think it's very insightful, which is that on the high end of what people can spend with you, you don't want to get in their way. You actually want to have at that high end of the market almost an infinite or extremely high, I should say, opportunity for them to spend a lot of money. And this is actually the case in the gaming world, where you have individuals that are spending $80,000, $100,000 as an individual in a given year in a specific game. And I think it's a really important way to sort of think about this, that it is very fluid. It does require segmentation in new and interesting ways, and it's very, very different than what we have seen in technology to date in other segments.
Yeah, I referenced this before, but just in our experience, the people that pay us the most churn the least as well. So that kind of fits that curve as well.
Yes, sir.
Yes, this is a question for Gina. Do you see MySpace or Facebook as direct competitors to Ning? And if not, why? And can you tell a little bit more about this gifting service that maybe you're you're working on for the fall?
Sure. So in terms of the social networking market, I think on some level every service is competing for people's time. So you need to have a compelling value proposition that is unique to what it is that you're doing. So as we think about social networking and what's happening in social networking, you have Facebook, which is just phenomenal for people you already know. So it is your high school friends and your college friends and your relatives. My mom just friended me on Facebook. And that's what they do better than anybody else. And it is an incredible experience and an incredible service for that. Twitter is amazing for news and real-time events. It is that stream, and they do that better than anybody else out there. LinkedIn is about your professional identity. And what we want to be, and are already sort of seeing pretty happy people on Ning, is to be a social platform for interests and passions. So most people have, at least in some research that we've been doing, less than a 50% overlap between the people that they know and their interests and passions. If you think about it in your own life, it makes sense. My husband is not necessarily as fired up about ska music as I am. So the opportunity that we really provide is an ability for people to meet other people around the world around a specific interest, passion, topic, movement, and that's what we do. So in that context, giving those people who have these new relationships around a specific interest or passion makes a lot of sense in terms of being able to gift and give virtual gifts. So let me give you an example that again, we haven't launched this yet, but we want the people who are on Muggle Space, which is the largest Harry Potter fan social network on the internet today, that they're able to meet other people, and as part of that relationship, whether it's for friendship, whether it's for somebody's birthday, whether it is for dating, being able to use virtual gifts as a way of expanding that relationship. So, if we were both on Muggle Space, I could give you a Quidditch broom in this example. So that's really what we're going to be offering, and I think it underscores an important point, which is we're going to be offering that because our network creators, the people who have created the social networks on Ning and are actively invested in it, have asked us for it. Give us more stuff to do. Give us more ways to engage our members. And these are the things that our members want to do. And I think that co-creation dynamic that certainly exists in social applications and social platforms online is incredibly powerful, and something that is one of the interesting and yet very core components to all of this social revolution that is certainly happening online today.
The microphone's here, yeah.
So I run marketing for a company that targets both small businesses and enterprise. So we have tiers ranging from free all the way up to very, very expensive. And Chris, you laid out a scale that was 5% is kind of minimal and 10% is profitable, and maybe 25% is the holy grail, which seems somewhat unattainable for folks that are, or at least in our position, where we're targeting a higher end market as a primary segment. So I was wondering if you guys could go down the line and give a little bit more insight into what is the average revenue that you guys are getting per paying user, and how does that factor into your assumptions or goals for percentage of user base paying?
In our case, whoa.
Excuse me.
In our case, about a little less than about 7% actually, of our active social networks are premium social networks, meaning that they're purchased our premium services. And we made a decision around pricing to really drive for broad-based adoption, even amongst our premium services. So we price them artificially low in that respect. So we have actually big companies using us, and small companies and individual companies of one using our premium services or buying our premium services that cost them $55 a month or less, depending on what they buy. So that was really so we could continue to just drive forward and focus on broad-based adoption more than it's a specific strategy at this point.
I'm not sure where the best case. Maybe I'll just pass the.
Oh, let's see. So we launched the service free, like I said. The first price point we tried just to get something out the door was $4.99 a month, and that was wildly popular. So we said, gee, we must be leaving money on the table. So we doubled prices, and we halved conversion for the first few months, and then it went all the way back up. So then our ARPU was about $10 a month. Since then, we've launched more expensive, which are less popular. And when you get into enterprise, we have models which are concurrent licenses and per seat and all you can eat and all that kind of stuff. So it gets a little muddled there. But just in our case, our $9.99 a month tier is the most popular. So our ARPU tends to be between $10 and $20 per paid user, and we have 100,000 paid users now. So if you can, I'm not actually allowed to come out and say how much money we make a month, but you can do the math based on those. That's how I get around that little.
You can do the math on ours. I mean, our products are $5.99. Apple takes 30%. We make $4.20. That's our average. That's how much money we make on our products because we price them at $5.99, which, as I said, is a very high price point in the iTunes store. But our products provide enough value that we have customers paying for it.
Yeah, and for us, we have ranges of products that range from, they don't cost anything, but they function as cross-promotional vehicles from one product to the next and drive a percentage of those sales, up to frontline premium products that are downloaded at $9.99 each. And in the social app space, you can buy point packs anywhere from 99 cents to $39.99. It just depends on how much of the regulating stat you want to consume.
Yeah, and I wouldn't get too hung up on kind of conversion rates, because if you look at LogMeIn just went public recently. If you look at their filing, their conversion rate is barely, between 1% and 2%, and they're a publicly traded.
Which company is this?
LogMeIn. They're kind of like GoToMyPC, but for the Soho and SMB market. And in my conversations, and we've done a whole study around this in enterprise, the conversion rate is anywhere between 1% and 20%. So if you're in that range, and similarly, churn is anywhere between 2% and 25%. So, and that's, a lot of people ask me, how do you control churn? What should I do about churn? And I'll just ask them, what do you think your churn should be? And it's completely different for each industry. Ours just happens to be in the 3 to 5% conversion rate, and we make it work, pricing accordingly.
So we have 5 minutes, and I'm going to try to get in as many questions as possible. So if I could ask people who have the microphone to ask a short question of a single panel member, and name the panel member, make your question short, and we'll try to get 2 or 3 more in.
I wasn't prepared for that. First, I find it fascinating that pricing strategies has become a sexy topic again for evening audiences. And my question is about the conversion points for freemium services. How important is the lock-in, user lock-in? Do they still have a choice, or do they have to convert? I assume it's somewhat easier to go from text-free to another provider if you reach your limit. It's probably a little bit more difficult for a company to switch from YouSendIt, and it's probably a real pain to switch to a different network platform. What do your users say? Do they really feel that they have a choice, or are they forced in the upgrade?
Well, we've done some stuff that is a real issue for us, and so we've changed the product to retain that free user. So when you sign up for TextFree, you get a textfree.us address. So I'm Joe at textfree.us. And if you go to, and then you start telling all your friends, you can text me free here, this is awesome. And then if you're going to switch, well, then you're going to have to retell all your friends and so on. It's sort of like the phone number game. We didn't have that in the beginning, and we added that more recently, and it's helped a bit with retention.
Okay, over here.
Hi. Hi, I have a question regarding, actually for Gina. In the world of free, where online display advertising hasn't really kept up with the pace of innovation, where do you see the future of online display advertising when it comes to social ad? And by social ad, I mean word of mouth, product endorsement by part of your social graph, or the community as a whole, when it comes to actual rendering and display of the ad?
I think it's to be determined. And the reason for that is because there is this very fine line in everything you just articulated, where in traditional media or even other types of online media, it's product placement, it's recommendations. In a social environment where authenticity is absolutely key, it's spam. So I think that, again, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do know that this is an area that is going to see pretty dramatic innovation, and that the ad solution and the way that brands participate in the context of a social network, whether it's around an interest or passion, or whether it's around people that it's just going to be different, because the product, the service, the medium itself is different.
So we'll take one last question, then afterwards I should say that perhaps some of the panelists may be able to stick around for a few minutes, so there's questions that are left unanswered in the public forum. Maybe you can ask one-on-one. So last question, make it good.
I'm not sure who to direct it to, but we're in Silicon Valley. There's probably a lot of people in the audience who are in enterprise software, and there's been a lot of discussion about consumer online services, but no discussion about free enterprise software. Could anybody comment on that?
Did you not get the YouSendIt one?
It's kind of cheating because we started as consumer service, but yeah, I mean, YouSendIt is bought by enterprises. Free inside enterprise is something I've been talking about for quite a while, and I only have one data point, which is ours. I worked at Red Hat too, so maybe open source is another one, but it goes back to my earlier statement that I believe every user on the web, on mobile, every consumer, every professional values consumer experience, and that's all that really matters, is kind of that end user experience. And what we found is by catering to that end user experience, it's almost forced the IT organization to say, okay, I've tried to push this enterprise managed file transfer service down on you guys, and you're still using the YouSendIt free service. And I don't have time to chase all of you to enforce this. So they come to us and buy our hosted managed file transfer service, which offers the same security and auditing capability. So I really think that's what's going to lead the charge is consumer experience inside enterprise, driving grassroots adoption to things like YouSendIt, wikis, Skype, and things like that. So I think this Enterprise 2.0 or Office 2.0 movement has just begun as busy people want to be very productive and want to have services as easy to use as they would at home, at work.
I'll just add to that. I mean, the transition to software as a service, the hosted thing, has introduced a whole new suite of pricing models. From the kind of standard site license to almost all freemium models of various sorts, but it's feature limited, or it's capacity limited, or it's transaction limited, or it's seat limited, or it's time limited, and every company has a different sort of free premium divide. But I would expect that freemium would be pretty much the default for enterprise software in the hosted space going forward.
We still have people that say, sell us a server behind your firewall, and I'll say, well, go talk to our competitor who has a server. That's not the business that we're in. But that's changed. A couple of years ago, there are lots of CIOs that wouldn't buy from me that have come back and said, okay, we get it. Companies like Salesforce have proven that you can put intellectual property, core IP, your customer list in the cloud, and we can still make money and be safe and sleep at night. So they've started to open up more hosted email and services like ours in the cloud.
Terrific. So I now have to market my book. I believe there's stacks of them out there, which I'd be happy to sign. There may be some payment required. I'm not sure. But please join me in thanking our panel.
Thank you very much, Gina, Ranjith, Joe's 1 and 2, Neil, and Chris, and for sharing your views with us tonight. As a small gesture of our appreciation, we have a fine Churchill Club t-shirt for you. We hope that you will wear it. It is free, and we hope that you'll wear it in good health. Although Chris's book tonight might not be free, I'm sure it's very reasonably priced. It is atomic. It's nice to hold, and it's not going to vaporize on you. So be sure and pick your copy out on the way up. I'd like to once again thank our sponsor, Airfoil. Thank you very much. Microsoft for hosting. And to all of you for coming. Have a great night.